All right. Looks like we're live here. Cool. Well, we will let people start to filter in. Maybe as we let people start to filter in, we can go through some introductions, just kind of start those off. I'll give mine first since I'm the least important one here. So I am Connor. I'm the co-founder of Tribe Dynamics. And we founded the company about 7-8 years ago, in that range. And, most people here know what we do. And we've got 3 amazing guests here at the end of the day that I'm so annoyed we didn't put at the beginning of the day, but we're gonna make the best of it and send it around. So with that, why don't we go around in introductions? Kellyanne, do you want to kind of give it a start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kellyanne Miller. I'm the brand marketing director at Kendra Scott. I've been with the company for about 3.5 years now. So obviously oversee all brands, so social influencer brand partnerships, marketing operations, and then overall arching brand initiatives.
Great.
And I live in Austin now. I'm a recent Austinite.
Nice. Swan, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Swan Sit. The first part of my career was in classic advertising and marketing. Then I moved into digital over the last 10 years, working at brands like Estee Lauder, Elizabeth Arden, Revlon. And then my last full-time role was at Nike. I was the global head of digital marketing, working on campaigns like the Colin Kaepernick one with Just Do It, and then running North America e-commerce. But since last summer, I've moved into board and advisory roles. So I sit on the boards of 2 public companies, Edgewell, which has household brands like Playtex, OB, Banana Boat, Hawaiian Tropic, etc., Schick Razors, and on Nova Bay, a pharmaceuticals company. I sit on the board of Farniente, a winery in Napa, which is really fun. And I'm also an operating partner at a VC called AF Ventures.
Sounds like you're living your best life there. I'm not on the board of any wineries, but it doesn't sound.
Connor, you're always invited. When things die down and we can all get on planes easily, we can all go to Napa for a trip.
I just have my next career goal: board role at a winery. Check. That's the target. Barbara, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Barbara Roll. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Topics Brands. Topics Brands is a private equity skincare holding, and some of the brands in our holding include Derma E. We just launched a brand called Dr. Zenavia, and a few more. And I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for the invite, Convert.
Yeah, no problem. And why don't we kind of stick with you to start out? Obviously one of the big topic that we're talking about here is kind of direct to consumer, right? Which is for some brands, something that is built into their DNA from the beginning. I think for other brands is something that they're having to transition into over these last 6 months, which I think you guys all have experience on, across the spectrum when it comes to that. So Barbara, from your perspective, what are some of the elements that make up a really successful direct-to-consumer approach? Like, what are the core components that make that approach work?
Yeah, I love that question. I think, any digital first or direct-to-consumer brand right now is super happy that they are. They're probably seeing some great results as a factor of that. I think it's just having this real. What's worked for us is having a very digital integrated marketing approach. And I think that means everything online, from evergreen media and press coverage to really key synergistic amplifying influencer relation programs to digital ad as well as social. Social is that great place to build community, and then the whole back end of your e-commerce marketing. So it's just everything there. Having all of those work together well will, I think, yields great results.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Swan, from your perspective with Nike, obviously that's a much bigger beast, right? When it comes to marketing direct to consumer, what did that look like being inside kind of a company like that, as well as, the companies that you're inside of now? Obviously you're seeing a lot of different verticals there. What are some of the elements you've seen work?
Absolutely. What's really interesting when we talk to D2C is sometimes we reduce it to digital first or digital only brands. And I like to remind everyone of the nuance that D2C means you sell direct to a consumer and not wholesale or through a retailer. So technically, Gap would be a D2C brand, even though it's legacy and not digital only. And if you ask the team at Nike Direct, they would consider themselves a D2C brand, right? So I think it's important to understand the nuance of digital first, online only, all the way to the spectrum of some legacy companies that are also direct to consumer, right? They just didn't have the benefit of having e-commerce when they launched. And so when you think about what makes them work, what's really cool is I've been working on this digital platform for the past decade, and it's worked across massive companies with 35 billion in revenue at Nike size, all the way down to startups in the VC portfolio I work with. And it's all about putting the consumer first at the center of the journey. Too often we get so big, and even with small teams, we have silos about decision-making, about content, and about budgets. So we make our consumers shop our org chart or our P&L, right? Which team owns what? And if you put the consumer at the center of the journey, regardless of the size of your business, you actually are able to be consistent about your content and your messaging, your product offerings, and understanding who they are, so you have a better chance of intersecting them at the right time with the right products and right message. So I think agnostic of your size of company, if you put the consumer first, which arguably is easier if you're digital first, but even the legacy companies are starting to break down those silos, that's the only way the consumers will really fall in love with your brand. Because at the end of the day, they don't care if they're buying Nike at Nike.com or at Foot Locker or, like secondhand on some sort of like sneaker resale site. It's still Nike, right? So if you don't put the consumer at the center and you get too bogged down in the metrics that each channel owns, the decisions each one's own, then you don't actually end up having a consistent relationship with your consumer. And of course, beyond that, there's so much you have to integrate with content and data, but if you don't put them at the start of the journey in the center, you'll never even get to the integration.
Yeah, and I think that's a really big challenge for these kind of traditional brands that have built their marketing infrastructure around kind of different channels versus, a brand that's really started kind of from the ground up in this new era, has some advantages there, but it doesn't mean that they're not moving in that direction and they're not figuring it out. Nike's a great case study. Kellyanne, from your perspective, obviously you're out there kind of executing a lot of this stuff, kind of boots on the ground. One of the things that I've been really curious about, and this is kind of something that we're dealing with as well, right? So when we did our first virtual summit, we were like the first people to do it. And now there's been it's total Zoom fatigue, right? On the B2B side. And so frankly, down to little kids who are just, stuck in Zoom calls all day. So for you, does it feel like there's just a lot of noise, a lot of content out there right now? And if it does, what are some of the approaches that you found kind of break through that, right? For you guys at Kendra Scott?
Yeah, I think for my biggest thing is to lead with what works for you as a brand. So for us, we are a company, we have our 3 company pillars: family, fashion, philanthropy. So lead with that, with everything you do, and then just knowing that you don't have to conform to something. And I think, I know TikTok has been a conversation, and I actually use it as an example. So we have a great influencer program, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be. We have a fantastic, robust program. However, TikTok comes along and everybody's like, oh, are you having your influencers on Instagram go to TikTok? And I was like, well, that's not where we will win if we ask them to do something that's not their expertise. So again, just knowing and leading with what performs and what does well for you. And so a prime example for us in the TikTok and content spaces, people come to us for our natural stones, our beautiful stones, our intricacy of them. And so on TikTok, we've been leaning into those, and those have been something that have been a top performer for us. So that's been really fun to see.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's tough. Some people aren't going to be good at dancing, right? And that's just not, so TikTok's not going to be for them.
Yeah,
so.
and force it. I think that's another thing is everybody they hear TikTok and they want to run to it or something, but coming back to prioritization and customization. So that customization, what works on Instagram doesn't work on TikTok. What works on TikTok doesn't work on Facebook. So kind of that segmentation of prioritizing your messaging to each channel is what I would say is definitely something that we're currently focusing on, especially going into the holiday season.
Yeah, totally. That's it's fun. This all came before the holidays, right?
Yeah.
I had somebody bring up, they're like, so what's your plan post-election? Or what do you recommend post-election? I was like, dear God, I have no idea. Like, I haven't even gotten that far in 2020, and I'm terrified when it gets there.
I'm really excited for holiday though. I think we as marketers are going to learn so much in this time. We're fortunate enough to we're going to be able to test things prior. I think because we knew this was happening in March, that we were able to test some things and kind of act on those going into holidays. So I'm really, really excited to, I know it sounds crazy to see these results and to honestly bring those learnings into 2021.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely forced people to accelerate, their
Yeah.
timelines. No choice on whether you develop the new website or not. Barbara, from your perspective, right, looking at these last 6 months, with COVID, social distancing, all these kinds of things, what have been some of the challenges of kind of transitioning from a model that is more traditional? Like, you had a fairly traditional distribution, or not fairly traditional, but Ulta, et cetera. What have been some of the challenges there? And then what have been some of the things that you think like, wow, this is something that just really went well, better than we expected to?
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. I mean, Dermy E as a brand, for example, specifically is, we're sold in Ulta and Target and Whole Foods and so forth. We were kind of lucky that some of those were considered essential businesses. And then Ulta closed, and Ulta is an incredible partner of ours, and we are, they're really, So that was a bit of a pivot. What was really good to see, and so first there was store closing, which was a shift for us. Then second was that people were losing jobs, which means that there's less spend, right? So both of those things were happening. And so we started to do what every company does at that moment, kind of look at your budgets and kind of do some reforecasting, make some assumptions. For us, we started to ask ourselves, the last recession, we talked about this lipstick effect. Does that work still? Like, in this environment, is that still a thing? And, what we were really happy to see is that, one, because our brands had been working on really being online with our consumer, because we believe that's where our consumer spends most of their time. So that's our focus. Like, all of the other integrated marketing, that's more like, paper media, and billboards and what have you, outdoor and not online. We kind of left behind and really focused and leaned in there. And I think it really helped us. We leaned into our community on social a lot and made sure that we were having real conversations with them. We synergized even closer with our influencer partners who are also going through all of these strange moments that with us and sharing their experiences. It was nice to see that in skincare, at least in beauty where we are, that as people are safe at home, they're also leaning into like taking care of themselves more, self-treating themselves, doing at-home spas. So really right in our wheelhouse. So it was actually quite fortunate. We haven't seen a big downturn at all. And in fact, Ulta, we just saw pivots. We saw people from going into store to buying online. And I think that's a huge advantage of building your brand online, where the consumer is spending a lot of their time, is that in moments where things shut down, which no one would have foreseen, is just this shift of purchase habits. So that really worked well for us. But we did pivot a bit. We did lean in more on our social community. We had to lean in with change of social impact that was happening as well. And making sure we were there for our influencers was a big part of what we were trying to do.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's actually pretty impressive how resilient the economy's been in general. Like, I know Nike just blew out their expectations just today, I think. And then I'm on the board of another consumer company that's, of decent size. And what was funny was, the department stores really did terrible for them during that time. But then they had this boutiques business that was like a third of the revenue. And that was actually up year over year. And it's like, what? Like, how are they making this happen? So it's pretty cool to see that. Swan, on your side, obviously now, having board roles in all these different companies, you've probably gotten exposure to a variety of different approaches that have been really unique. Have you seen anything that really surprised or impressed you across your portfolio companies in terms of how they've handled the last 6 months and some of the things that have worked?
The past 6 months have been tough for everybody, but in some ways, the upstart brands, which sometimes it feels like such a hill to climb to compete with the legacy brands that are household names, they've fared better because they pivot faster. right? When you don't have a big infrastructure, maybe normal life is really difficult because you have to do everything manually by yourself. But when things fall apart, guess what? You're still doing that anyway, and the big companies are running out of the building like the sky is falling. So what I've loved is the ability for these smaller companies to pivot. I mean, putting aside the effects of COVID itself, right? Because I think those are extraneous. What I like about COVID changing is that it's accelerated e-commerce forward about 3 years is what industry estimates are saying. So what we're seeing is a change in how we distribute content and product, right? I think DTC is doing well because obviously, next gen consumers care about values and they're more entrepreneurial, and that kind of seeps into how they shop as well as the businesses they want to support. And sometimes these D2C businesses are producing products that are a better fit because they understand modern consumers, so they fill those gaps and needs better. But if you look at the ecosystem of how shifting everything to online shopping and e-commerce has changed things, there's a few things I think are really interesting. People are spending more time on screen. So if you're producing better content with better targeting, you hit home runs, because the magic moment between a consumer and the brand is you get me, right? So it doesn't always have to be a product post. In fact, sometimes I remember when I was at Elizabeth Arden, we had this post about, oh my God, it's Monday, but at least my eyebrows are great. Like that got more engagement than anything about, eyebrow products we could have put up. So that magic moment about brands and consumers having a connection where a consumer feels like the brand gets them, right? So when people are spending more time on screen, what a better way to create more creative content, test it and target it. Then I think we're starting to see actually more expansion of a middle funnel, which is where you have upper funnel where people are aware of your product. You've got the lower funnel where they convert and purchase, but in the middle funnel is where the consideration and engagement happens. And normally when you have an impulse purchase, no one spends any time there. But we're all stuck at home, we're all on our screens, and now we get to research every product equally well. We're not walking down a store aisle and having an impulse purchase. We're looking into everything we buy and drop into the cart. So I think the emergence of this middle funnel combined with better content and better targeting is what's really impressed me about some smaller companies during this time, because changing your messaging and your content at a big company could take months of creative team approvals. If you're a smaller company, you can do it today, right? So the responsiveness, and it doesn't always have to be big legacy companies, right? I think if you think about like Ryan Reynolds and what he did with Aviation Gin, what he's doing with Mint Mobile, like compressing down that ability to pivot and change and test in the creative process is what actually hit the home run with some of these consumers.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you talk about this kind of speed of pivot, and they cut a lot of crap for this, but I think ultimately it's worked out well for them, which was, Instagram shortly after seeing Snapchat do well, basically copied stories, right? And they cut a lot of crap for that. Pinterest just rolled it out today. I think Twitter rolled it out last week. And so they have a year-long advantage, or however long it is that they kind of have had it. And it's just, I don't know, I actually kind of admired how fast they moved there, even though it was obviously to directly copy a competitor.
They did that with stories too, right? That's how stories came about, was because of Snapchat, right? This come up and disappear, and they kind of killed Snapchat for monetization by doing that.
Well, isn't that your form of flattery, right? To copy, but features aren't worth anything without community, right? Because you can be the best product on the market, but if no one's on the platform, it doesn't matter, right? So it comes down to building community, and community I see as frequency of touch meets commonality of purpose. You have to believe in the same thing, and then you have to engage on an often enough cycle that you come back to it. And I think regardless of what features each of these platforms have, if they can mobilize the community to stand behind the frequency of touch meets commonality of purpose, I don't care who has what feature, that's what's going to be sticky.
I can see why you're on boards. It's a much more complex way of describing it than I do. So Kelly, I'd actually love to hear, speaking about the topic of community, what are some of the tactical ways that you guys build community at Kendra Scott? And I didn't get to ask you earlier, but I'd love to hear about, have you guys done anything innovative with your retail spaces during COVID that has worked really well, right? I know that when I talked to Vasiliki, she said that they, at Unilever, didn't furlough anybody, but brought them in and made them online consultants. So I was like, oh, that's really cool that they did that. So I'd love to hear one, I kind of forgot what I was saying the first part.
Retail.
Yeah. Let's talk about those. Community, and then the retail locations, how you've used those.
I'll start with, on the retail front, I'm sure you guys probably know we have a lot of retail stores. So we have around 108 retail stores. So obviously COVID has impacted us. However, I say this every day, I feel like, but I applaud our team. I'm so gracious to them because our IT team was able to implement a buy online, pick up in store within a 3-month time frame or 2-month time frame, which was on a 2021 roadmap for us. So they were, again, nimble, fast, able to make it happen. And it was definitely a want in the market. So I think that was one of our biggest opportunities. And the second is similar to what you just mentioned. Our employees are going out and asking if they want to host a virtual Kindred Gives Back event. So we host these virtual Kindred Gives Back events where you can host an event and 20% of the proceeds go back to a charity of your choice. So that is something near and dear to the company and Kendra's heart. And it's something we didn't want to stop because of COVID. And so we have had, I genuinely think almost every employee personally has probably hosted one too, along with an amazing customer base of us. So that's been a huge accomplishment. We've been able to hit a lot of milestones and support a lot of people in this time frame. So that's definitely been a huge win for us. It's something that it's in our blood to do good and to give back. And it's been awesome to kind of see that still continue in a retail space when it's been hard the last few months. So that's the retail side. And then on the influencer note, you said, how are we building an influencer community to stay loyal? Is that what was the exact?
Yeah, generally, just like what are some of the tactics that you've used to kind of continue to maintain community during this time?
Yeah.
Like, is it virtual happy hours? Is it like, what are some of the things you've done?
Yeah, so I would say even pre-COVID, and Connor, you probably know this more than anybody, these gals and guys, these are influencers, we genuinely treat them as Kendra Scott employees. They are arms and limbs to us. They have my phone number. They have our creative team's phone number. Like, they are part of our family and we treat them like that. And similar to family, we treat them, if you have something you want to support, like, use us as a platform so that we can help you accomplish what you want to accomplish as an entrepreneur as well. So we kind of have them lean on us just as much as we lean on them. And that's what creates that partnership. And then on the influencer side, I'm sure everybody has gone through their amount of unfollows and following new people and whatever it may be. And so I will say, like, with our community, we have picked people throughout the years and worked with people that are, that their morals and what they stand for and what they want to accomplish are very similar to what we want to accomplish as a brand. So we've been keeping our community really tight to us. I think with COVID, it was hard. They were just as nervous and scared that they weren't going to get paid partnerships and whatever it may be. And so we actually bumped up our communication with them to over once a week. Like, we literally crazy communication with them. And then we started to swindle down again. And now we're in a place where everybody feels calm, but no matter what, it was like, you can call me at any time. Like, we are here for you as a Kendra Scott community. And I think that's something that made our community feel at peace and feel like they want to support us even more, knowing that they can lean on us during that time. That's
really cool. Congrats on that. Barbara, for you, when you came into Derma E, right, which was a little while ago, I don't think influencers were really at the core of the, or even social was at the core of the brand. What were some of the things that you put into place that worked really well? And as well as maybe there were things that you tried that didn't work. Would love to hear about those.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's fun about these brands is that, you get to go in and just really try things out, measure, shift if you need to, and continue to evolve in what's really working. And yeah, no, it's true. I mean, Derma E, if you don't know it, it's a 35-year-old natural skincare brand. It was born out of Whole Foods. Derma E was in Whole Foods when there were 2 Whole Foods. So it has a long line of just being very natural. And it was marketing by going to vegan fairs and putting out tables and talking about how we're vegan and GMO free. And we did do a shift. I mean, I think it, really my priority was to try and be where I feel like consumer spends time, which is on their phone. and, find our community there. And so putting in place first, social, build up social, but also just the influencers and finding our community within them. And that was really important. I think, Connor, quite frankly, I think Tribe and your team has been incredible partners to help with that, because what I think really helps build a great influencer community is just that authenticity, finding there's so many influencers, and you will find those that relate to your brand. And that's what we wanted, is those that truly love our brand and will be advocates of the brand genuinely. And then two, like that synergy. And you're talking about that. So, the synergy of it's interesting how often in this journey, I mean, now I think influencer marketing is something that's much more regular. Ironically, 5 years ago, it was not. It was still a question mark for some people, and definitely still is for some CFOs. But in the journey of that, I hear a lot of people come through that we don't believe in paying influencers. I'm like, well, how couldn't you? That's how they live, or how they want to one day live, is to earn a living being an influencer. Thus, they can't live off of night cream, right? I need to give them more than just night cream. So
edible, to be fair.
What?
La Mer is edible. Technically, I wouldn't recommend it. But
yeah, true. I mean, they could eat it too, so they could. I don't think it's the best diet, but yeah. But yeah. So for us, it was really about building a multi-tiered program that really speaks to everyone, from the smaller influencer to the very large influencer, whatever you term to call it, and that we really partner with them well and see ourselves as partners too. That synergistic opportunity of they support us and we support them. When we can, we will pay those and reward those that have really supported us in a multitude of ways, and it's worked. I mean, I have personal great friendships with many of them now, but more importantly, they love the brand, right? And your tool and Tribe has been such an important part of that. I think we have 4 different brands on it now, because the measurement of it is also key. It's great for them to know. It's helpful for us to know who's really partnering well with us when we have thousands in our program. So yeah.
Well, I wish I could say I planted you, but thanks for the thank you for the endorsements, Swan. So I'd love to hear. Not many people get to sit inside of a brand like Nike, right? And to be kind of at the center of what's one of the most forward-leading digital and e-commerce brands, as well as, frankly, your past experiences at a variety of brands that have done really well. And comment on La Mer. Not only is it potentially unhealthy, it just sounds very expensive as a diet. I can't imagine. I don't know how long you could my bank account could survive on that one. So what would you think, having been inside of there for a little while, what would you say, looking inside the machine, made them work so well? And I'd love to hear about the Colin Kaepernick campaign. I actually I didn't connect the dots on you being kind of involved in that. I have a chart, and it shows all of Nike's influencer coverage, and it's da 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 da, and it's boom, da 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 da. So tell me a little bit about kind of the inner workings of Nike and what worked well, and what were some of your learnings from there.
Yeah, it was an honor to work for a brand. I mean, I came to this country as an immigrant when I was 6 years old, and the brands I knew were Nike and McDonald's, right? And so to eventually get to the point of my career where I could be in-house at one of those brands that make you dream big was an incredible and humbling honor. What I'll say that Nike does well, before I even get into the specifics of any campaign, I think across all of their work, there's a few things that make Nike really successful. The first, storytelling from the heart. I've never been with a brand whose commercials make me cry. I tear up at almost every commercial I see. And they spend a ton of time and money and effort on getting that right. Now, I know that's a little bit in contrast to today, when we're just churning out content as fast as possible authentically, but there's a balance between the two. And if you're talking about a brand that's as legacy as that one, if you're going to broadcast a brand anthem like the Just Do It campaign every year, you better make sure that every word counts. So I think because the storytelling is so powerful, they can actually forego the volume of content over that quality of content, right? And not every brand has the authority to do that. You already have to have established awareness, some sort of engagement or loyalty. But if you have that and you continue to hit upon those emotional connections, you can actually weather against the volume of content that some of the newer brands are doing and still actually perform just as well. So the other thing to think about is not just the amazing commercials that make you cry, but think about the athletes on the roster. they have the best athlete in every sport. Jordan, LeBron, Serena, Tiger. So if you think about media budgets, and people are sometimes surprised at the smaller size of what you would think a media budget of a company that size would be, but athletes are your billboard, right? So it's a different way to think about media, and it doesn't have to be paid. And, sometimes if you actually look at the channels we're all in, Google, Facebook, right? I mean, 80% of all digital marketing dollars go straight to those guys, and 30% of every dollar raised in Silicon Valley goes straight to Google and Facebook. So those are getting overcrowded, right? And what's going to happen is a race to the bottom where the highest margin products win, because we're all fighting over the same CAC. And if you don't have enough margin to afford that customer acquisition cost, then you're in trouble. So the other way to combat it is to really do storytelling from the heart. Number two is to be everywhere the consumer is, right? And that doesn't mean being everywhere. It's everywhere where your consumer is. So that allows you to be consistent and to be available. And the interesting thing is Nike's had tons, like thousands of retail partners. And one of the things they did earlier this year is to scale it back to 50 key partners in the US. That was a really upsetting message to a lot of their retail partners. But why? We go back to point number one, storytelling from the heart. If you can't on your site or in your stores as a retail partner of Nike's continue to evangelize that story that they're so good at, then consumers can just go to Nike.com. Right? It doesn't matter how far the nearest store that sells Nike anymore, because everyone can type those four letters in and get to the website. So I think being good at storytelling combined with being where the consumer is. And then the third thing is knowing your consumer, right? It's across the channels, it's across retailers. We're working with, or I should say, they're working with consumers to do double blind matching of data sets, understanding the consumer about who she is and what she wants. Like if you go and just check off, say, basketball on your Nike profile, it's important to know if you're an NBA fan and you don't play basketball, or if you actually play, because the content we serve you is going to be completely different, right? Are you interested in what happened in the game last night and the drama and the gossip of the bubble of the NBA finals? Or do you actually want to know if that shoe has good ankle support, right? So I think if you combine all of those, like telling really true stories, being where your consumers are and meeting them, that's again, back to putting the consumer at the center. And then knowing your consumer, right? Knowing what they're interested in, where in the journey they are, how they're interacting with all your retail partners. And if it means pulling in your retail footprint so you have better partners that can share data and amplify your message, I think it's the beauty of all of those things working together that while a legacy company keeps Nike still at the forefront of the brands that people are excited about.
Yeah, I mean, sounds complicated, but it makes sense. I mean, complicated from an execution perspective, right? Conceptually, it makes sense. And I think the kind of the pulling back of the retailer footprint, there's a few examples of people doing that really successfully, and it's tough to do, right? It's a tough gig something tough that is tough to pull off. I'm trying to remember, I think Steve Jobs and Apple did that back when he first came on in his second tour, where he pulled back their retail footprint significantly and then rolled out their own stores. And it was, I mean, it's just, I think they're the most productive stores by dollar per square foot in the world. So this one, so Kellyanne and Barbara, I'd love to hear specifically, and Kellyanne, obviously this will be a little bit more involved for you, but kind of what role the founder has played inside of the brand. It seems fairly significant for you guys. And Barbara, I know that, Topics obviously bought you guys, and I think one of the founders walked away, but one is still involved. Well, I'd love to hear how they were involved, maybe on the way out as well. But yeah, Kellyanne, do you want to start with you?
Sure. Obviously I'm a little biased because I love her, but no, I think that it comes down to your brand purpose and knowing that if people are wanting to put their hard-earned, especially right now, money into something, they want to believe in it. And for our founder and our company, we want to do good and be good and continue to give back. I mean, Kendra said this since day one, that giving back is the truest form of success. And I think that is something that is embodied in all of our employees too. So I think in general, just knowing that you're buying a brand right now because you want to and you believe in that company. So I think that's something that Kendra embedded in the companies 16 plus years ago that I think has really stayed true through all the years.
And how is she still pretty involved in the day-to-day operations, or is it kind of being run by the team generally now?
Yeah, she is very much involved. She honestly, I don't know how she gets it all done in a day. But she especially, I will applaud her, especially since COVID. She has made sure that she's accessible to us just as much as the customer base. So you'll see in the next few days, actually, like we have these like fun cooking with Kendra segments, and she's been doing a bunch of IG lives and a lot of behind the scenes content with us. But she has gone above and beyond to make sure that we as a company and as employees are also supported too. And I think that also kind of trickles down to our leadership, and again, it just continues to flow down. But with all things COVID, we've been talking about the work-life balance is such a weird term right now, because you go work and then all of a sudden you have your dog barking, where like normally you would have, or your kids would be running around. Normally you have about a 10 to 15 minute or 30-minute commute, whatever it would be, to kind of switch lenses. And now you don't have that. Now they're merging. And so I think at the company in general, we have just an amazing stance of this work-life balance of this, your home is your home, like, and you need to get your personal things done just as much as work, if not more. And so you will never have to tell anybody if you're going to a doctor's appointment. Like it is all in your hands. And I think we actually kind of worked like that pre-COVID, to be totally honest. We had Flex Fridays, and it was just a very flexible and understanding company, and pre-COVID, and especially now.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think I've actually seen Barbara. I think I saw your cat there at one point.
Yeah.
On the back screen.
I'm trying to get in. He's like, hey, I'm like, oh, blocked you out. I knew better.
Yeah, but it's cool. I mean, I think it brings humanity into it too, right? Like, it's like, how often do you see somebody's house? Like, never.
Looking at everybody's artwork, and now I say this now, but we've always gone, it's so interesting to see people's, and you're actually getting to see people's their interests, and you get to see where they live and who they hang, like what they do outside. And everybody's always like, let me see your setup, and we'll like put our computer. It's just so interesting to kind of get to be playful in these situations.
Totally. Barbara, I'd love to hear from you on two topics, right? So one would be the founders. It's got to be weird for them to see it to get to this scale now, and like, cause having run it for so long.
Yeah.
And they were only 2 decades early when it came to trends.
Right. Pioneers. Yes.
So, and I'd also love to hear about, you've taken on a broader scope of brands as well, some of which had distribution channels that were severely impacted by COVID, not including Ulta. How have you guys managed through that, right? So I'd love to hear about those two things from you, just to make sure we get it in before we finish.
Yeah. So founders, yeah, you're right. And I stay really in close, I'm still have a close relationship with the founders. It's wonderful to work with them.
Hey, Barbara, I think we might be losing you a little bit from a connection perspective.
Working with entrepreneurs.
Hey, Kanya, if you're listening, do you think we
because
could?
They're so willing to just try what works. Oh, hold on.
All right, so just in the meantime, we'll let Barbara's connection catch up for a second. Barbara, if you can hear me.
Can you hear me, or am I frozen?
Yeah, you're a little frozen. What I'll do, I'll go to a question with Swan and then turn off your video, and then we'll go back to you to finish it out. So Swan, obviously you've got your investor hat on now, right? So you're looking at brands from an investor perspective. And I think there's a couple of things that are interesting for me, right? So one is you've got this just huge influx of influencer created brands. And I'd love to get your perspective on those brands. And then secondarily, I'd love to hear about, like, what are you guys looking for in the market? Like, what are you excited about? What have you seen that's fun?
Right. I think the influencer-led beauty brands succeed for a few reasons. I think number one, it's the authenticity and trust, right? That's a no-brainer. It's by them, and for their fans. And candidly, I mean, being in the beauty industry for a decade, it's not designed by men who'll never use the products, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
the influencers collaborating with the big companies that have the infrastructure and the product development is really smart. So the products are more on trend and meet the needs, because the typical also product development cycle in the beauty industry is a year and a half. You can't respond to the yellow lipstick that showed up on a runway, right? So influencers, I've seen them get products up in months, but I've seen some TikTok influencers get products up in 2 weeks, right? There is no way you can compete. And so this ties into the larger issue of, as I have my investor hat on, because it's funny because I'm at a company that's acquiring things, I'm at a company that's investing in things. So hopefully it's a whole full life cycle at some point. But aside from really strong operations, like really having those operational chops to really run and scale a company, I look for founders that have vision. And it doesn't mean the vision can't change, but you have to have that undeniable optimism in yourself and your team to push through some of those really hard challenges. But the thing I really look for is people who understand the pulse of culture. Because you asked me about Nike before, and I talked about the reasons why they're successful. And I purposely left this point out because I think Nike does it well, but I see startup brands doing it really well. Understanding the pulse of culture and understanding people. Because this, at the end of the day, is understanding people and their needs and their dreams and inspirations, right? So if you can tap into that, that's where you win. So what I look for is, yes, the operational chops, the vision and the drive of a founder, but someone who understands the pulse of culture. And whether it's creating their own products or Nike doing collaborations and scarcity drops, et cetera, if you have something people get excited about, they've come in your door because they want to be affiliated with your brand, not because of a price war or a distribution map.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I mean, this environment is just kind of tailor-made for smaller companies to succeed. Like you said previously, just the ability to pivot so quickly. And then it's like the one I was always fascinated with was ColourPop and broadly, I can't think of the name. Well, it was Spatz Labs. Anyways, they own their own manufacturing. It's in-house. And so they can literally say like, hey, based on today's Instagram comments, we're going to increase our production of like green eyeshadow. And like, that's crazy. And like, they can have that turned around in like less than a week. And so like the part of their founding story was they launched a palette with a YouTuber who was on Dancing with the Stars in like 3 days. Like that was, had it available for sale. So, okay. So Barbara, now that we've got you rebooted here, so would love to hear, and we'll kind of close it out with you. Would love to hear, hear about how the founders, let's see. Okay. Would love to hear about how you got the founders involved and like what it's like for them to see this kind of really grow big and then sell it. And then separately, just how you've managed these new brands that have distribution channels that are really, going through some pretty severe change right now.
Yeah, so for Derby and the founders, it's funny because I love working. I started to say that I love working with founders. They're entrepreneurs. They have that mentality of like looking for change and opportunity and willing to try anything, which is really wonderful to work with, which is different than the large corporations I had worked for in the past, where we were a little bit more rigid in what we could do. So that, and it was fun to take them on this journey of digital. Linda and David have been doing this for 35 years. They were in their 60s, young 60s. And like digital was such a weird thing. I remember when they sold the company, Linda said to me, like, I thought you were crazy, but like, no, look at it. It's so good. And David said, let her do her thing. I was like, okay. But so that was wonderful. And even now, as they start to see, they feel like they see their brand everywhere, and I still stay in contact with them, and they love to see the growth of their legacy of their work. They're amazed with like just the increase of distribution and the success that they see for the brand, which is really nice. And I was fortunate because they're entrepreneurs, they're willing to let us try, right? And it worked out for them. In terms of the brands that we have now in our holding, you're right. So we have DTC, I think for us, so the DTC brands like Dermy and Think, it's been a little bit easier because we've been in businesses that have stayed open. Dr. Zenavia, we just launched a digital first skincare brand that's going to go into Sephora as of October 15th, 13th. And it's everything digital first. So that, as you said, that just makes things a little bit, we get to do it in a modern way, right? So it's there are no restrictions. But we do have some brands that, distributed through dermatologist offices or through spa centers. And those are the ones which were really challenged during this period because offices closed and spa centers closed. Part of the reason why I took on the bigger role was to bring digital to them too. So that's our pivot. We're looking at how we continue to be where my philosophy, where the consumer is, right? So even for dermatologists, they are also buying things online and communicating with their patients, hopefully, and in that sort of way. And so we're looking to be a little bit more outside of the box of what maybe those channels have been used to in the past, and just bringing new thinking and opportunity to those businesses, which I think will be really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge, right? But you got to do it. Got to figure it out. So
yeah,
awesome,
right.
guys. Well, I really appreciate it. It sounds like we had pretty much everybody stick around for the whole talk, which means that you guys were really entertaining. So thanks so much for taking the time out. Thanks so much for participating and sharing what you guys have learned. And I know a lot of people learned from it. So thanks again. And yeah, and this is the end of Earned. Videos will be available online afterwards and distributed via email. So thanks again, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.